The Exiled Lands is a curious place. Its true location is uncertain to most, and these scorched sands and vicious mountains are a hostile home to those prisoners bonded to the landscape. Unable to escape, those prisoners face death and struggle at every turn, but by whose design? The form of the Exiled Lands was not truly made by anyone. The careful ripples of sand and violent pillars of stone were formed, as any land is, by tectonic rumblings from eons ago. Over the course of this land's history, it has seen many races lay their feet upon the sands. The Giant Kings once held these kingdoms as their own, a place to create their cities and weave their dark arts. However, before the Giant Kings, the ailing remnants of the Serpent Men of Volusia settled within the volcano. The Giant Kings and the Serpent Men eventually met and forged an alliance, though through possession of the Serpent Ring of Set, the Giant Kings unknowingly garnered the disdain of the Serpent Men. During this time, the Lemurians arrived on the Exiled Lands, fleeing the Cataclysm in the Far East. The Lemurians and the Giant Kings allied, creating bracelets to allow each other to communicate. This bond held until the Lemurians discovered the vile Serpent Men. Though they were an ancient enemy of humankind, the Giant Kings denied the Lemurians the chance to finally dispose of the tattered remains of the Serpent race. With that, the Lemurians launched a rebellion that would shape the fate of the Exiled Lands. The awakened staff of the Triumvirate, a gift from the Serpents to the Giant Kings, maligned their thoughts. The staff whispered to the Giant Kings, leading them to take the unwise path through the war. The Archivist heard the whispers and raised the cursed wall to entrap the Lemurians, the first cornerstone of the modern Exiled Lands. As the Archivist raised the cursed wall, the bracelets used to communicate would be turned against the Lemurians. The magic of the Giant Kings was used to enslave the humans, preventing them from leaving the boundaries of the cursed wall. Nevertheless, despite the dire circumstances, the Lemurians fought on. The staff also caused the Warmaker to unleash the Sandstorm after a crushing defeat north of the unnamed city. The Sandstorm was locked into place by a Lemurian priest, scourging the once fertile lands, turning grassy hills to desert over the centuries. Eventually, the Kari, rulers of an empire toppled through rebellion, arrived on the shores of the Exiled Lands. They had once enslaved the disparate Lemurians, but here, things were different. History seems uncertain on this segment, but some believe the Kari and the Lemurians worked together to exterminate the last of the Giant Kings. Those Giant Kings were eventually hunted to near extinction. The Lemurians spread out after the war, mingling with other races to become the modern-day Hyrcanians. The Kari too attempted to settle and build their own empire, though the rumblings of the earth doomed them to a dark existence and a violent extinction within the cave beneath the Exiled Lands. For many years after, the Exiled Lands laid in the ruins of the Lemurian uprising. The only living vestige of that conflict, Warmaker Clail, stood in despondency within the ruins of the once glorious city that he himself had inadvertently helped to destroy. Many, many years later though, human feet would eventually walk the sands of the unnamed city once more. On yet another of his journeys seeking sorcerous knowledge, Toth Amon, a sorcerer of the Black Ring of Stygia, stumbled upon the unnamed city. Therein he found the Warmaker. Through their conversation, Toth learned of artifacts still remaining beneath the city. He explored further and eventually found the Serpent Ring of Set and the slave bracelets of the Giant Kings. Stealing them away from the unnamed city, this single theft would shape the course of fate for the Exiled Lands. Upon his return to Stygia, Toth made a proposition to King Cestophan. Toth would offer to provide a prison for the political and ideological enemies of the king, and in return, the king would provide soldiers to ride through the prison occasionally, purging the land and collecting any artifacts that had escaped Toth's grasp. King Sestefan accepted the deal, solidifying the Exiled Lands as a prison. The enemies of the Stygian monarchy were sent to the Exiled Lands, doomed to remain within the curse walls by the repurposed bracelets of the Giant Kings. Toth leveraged the deal to exile his own opponents too, including Mek-Kamoses. Over the years though, the deal has altered, and Toth has extended that same offer to other rulers elsewhere across the world. King Sestefan, however, remains unaware of Toth's political manoeuvring. As he grew in power, Toth Amon began to take a more hands-off approach, allowing his underlings and enforcers to deal with any issues that may arise. However, as Toth Amon's efforts are focused elsewhere, the Exiled Lands is on the cusp of change. Mek-Kamoses works to break the bonds of the Cursed Wall, and should those prisoners flow outwards, Toth Amon's political workings would surely crumble to dust. The modern Exiled Lands were forged by 4 core events: the settling of the Serpent Men of Volusia, the creation of the Bracelets, the Lemurian Uprising, and Toth Amon stumbling across the city. These 4 events are the keystones in the role of the Exiled Lands serving as a prison for the enemies of kings and rulers across the world. In truth, no singular person or action created these lands as we know them. A combination of events, gargantuan wars to the flap of a butterfly's wings, led to the land we see before us. Though it is currently under the control of Toth Amon, he is far from their true architect. This prison has served Toth Amon's interests over the decades, holding hundreds, if not thousands, of prisoners. Should Mek's ritual be successful though, the chains that have bonded man for so long to these lands may finally break, and the Exiled Lands shall become free once more. Thank you for watching. The history of the Exiled Lands is incredibly interesting and weaves in multiple pieces of lore that I've already covered individually in the past. With the map potentially on the cusp of change in the next stage, I think now is the best time to look back on its history before it potentially takes quite a large shift. As always, a massive thanks to our wonderful esteemed coffee cultists for continuing to support the channel over on Patreon. Again, thanks for watching, take care, and I'll see you soon.